Don't forget to use your microphones. You all have to share. Thank you.
Tina, can you share with Ted? Okay. Because I was going to share with you because of. Welcome to the City Council and the Planning Commission, City of Petoskey's August 8th, 2023 special session, joint session between Council and the Planning Commission. I think this is a good opportunity, kill two birds with one stone for the presentation, and it lets everybody know where we're at with this. Remember, I'm going to turn this over to Shane in just a sec, but remember that this is not written in stone that these things are all going to happen. This is kind of like a Christmas wish list where you go through the catalog more or less, but we've had the help of our parents up here to kind of direct us on what pages to fold over in the calendar, the catalog, as you remember. So what we'll do is just know and don't get upset if you see something and go, oh my gosh, you can't be doing that. This is only a tentative, and it may not, a lot of this stuff come to fruition if there isn't grant money or if there is not a funds available to pull this off with. So this is kind of like let's have a plan, but let's have it kind of have a fluidity to it. So I'm going to turn this over to Shane, our city manager, and he's going to direct the show at this point. Shane, do you want questions after each year, or do you want it after each line or section? What do you prefer?
Sarah's going to do roll call first, and then I'll answer that question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't do that either.
Would you please all rise? Look at the American flag for the Pledge of Allegiance of the United States of America's flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm kind of off soon today because this is the first meeting I haven't worn a tie in a single day in 8 years.
Yes.
So I'm relaxed. Take it away.
Moore. Present. Shields.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
Walker. Here. Murphy. Braddock. Here. Buck.
Here.
Retmer. Here. McSweeney.
Here.
Meridian.
Here.
Newman.
Here.
Paul.
Here.
Robson. Here. And Wilmot.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you all very much. I certainly appreciate and value your time this evening. You know, typically when we get together on a summer day like this, part of me wishes it was kind of stormy and nasty out, and didn't really have anything better to do than come together. But unfortunately, it's on another beautiful Petoskey summer day. So I certainly appreciate your time today and this evening. Do apologize logistically for how we're set up. This is obviously not the ideal spot for a presenter to be behind you, but we need to be able to see the screen as well. We are in the midst of you might notice that we've upgraded our monitors. We've added a monitor to this side of the room. So when you're on that side of the room in the audience, you can see what's going on. So these are supposed to mirror each other. As you can see, that's not quite happening yet. So we're still working with our IT partner to help us through that process. But unfortunately, we didn't quite meet the milestone for this evening. So we have this portable cart, and I think it'll function just fine this evening. So again, thank you for your time. The mayor's question, this is a very informal process. I want that to be that way. That we've not done this. We've had combined meetings, obviously, with the two bodies, but this is the first time we've gone through this process with a capital improvement plan. So certainly I'm always open to your constructive feedback on how we can improve this process going forward. There's multiple ways to do this. This is just one way to kind of have both bodies kind of hear the same information at the same time from our leadership team. Hopefully get your questions asked and get some clarity in your mind. So when it does come before you formally. Each body will be prepared to, you've seen this before, you've kind of run through it before, and so this is not new information. So I always believe there's value of seeing things multiple times, and getting your questions answered up front. So feel free to stop, whoever is presenting. You have your microphone. We are very informal here. Feel free to get up and get some food, beverages, use the facilities as needed. But we're going to run through these slides. We've got a number of them, but I'm a visual learner. I love pictures and being able to translate learning that way. So I've asked staff to incorporate pictures as they're presenting, so you can kind of put eyes on specific projects, specific equipment that we're talking about, specific areas of town that we're talking about as well. So you'll see a number of pictures as we go through here as well to kind of build that that case for the item to be in this document to begin with. Let's see. I do apologize. I cannot see that. So I am actually getting older and transitioning. So my apologies. So we are going through the 6-year capital improvement plan this evening. This is as the mayor mentioned, a planning tool. Helps us to provide some basis so we're not reacting continually to issues as they come about. Hopefully we're being more proactive, planning for replacements, planning for projects before they become, headlines on a newspaper that we're now dealing with a sinkhole or water running down the street or a number of things that could transpire, over the course of time as things start to fail. So this helps us to and guides us as we put numbers together. These are the things that we believe are important enough to be put in this plan that we need to start planning for from a budgeting standpoint, bring that to the table and start to kind of put some process in place to address these issues as we move forward. So the capital improvement plan is kind of, you can find that in the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, which is Act 33 of 2008. That provides some basis for what we're up to with this plan. Some guidance comes from that act that you can use and follow along. So really the capital improvement plan helps us coordinate locations of projects, timing of projects, and financing of capital improvements over, again, a multiple year period, in this case, 6 years. And to Petoskey's credit, we even go beyond that. And in the back of the document, there's items that are longer term that we haven't really found necessarily funding for, but we know that these are things that we're going to have to address at some point, in the future here. So in the back of the document, there's a number of things, and typically as this thing functions, things kind of move up as we go through time. So those items that are in the back of the document, hopefully will start migrating toward the front as we start addressing issues and crossing things off of our list. Capital improvements are typically major, non-reoccurring physical expenditures such as land, buildings, public infrastructure, and equipment. So the CIP does assist us in the implementation. Planning Commission went through a very long process, strategic planning process, a wonderful document that we have, the Livable Petoskey Plan, and it helps us support, the CIP helps support those priorities within the master plan as well. So what is a definition typically of a capital expenditure? And this is rough, but it provides some guidance for us. Anything greater than 3 years of useful life, greater than $25,000 in project costs, or greater than $10,000 in equipment, vehicle, or material. So just giving some broad brush numbers to the plan itself. Again, looking at the 6-year period. $73.8 million of expenditures over that 6-year period. And it's important to really focus our attention because this can get a little overwhelming as you look at number one, look at that dollar amount. And number two, there's a lot to these plans. And again, I credit our staff. We've been working through this since June. One of the things I tried to have staff do, and I know they did this very well, was get these documents in front of their staff. We want to get feedback from all of our staff members because they're in the field, boots on the ground, that are actually doing this work, providing this oversight. So making sure that documents are in front of them, they can kind of chime in on priorities and needs as well. So making sure that nothing worse than having a staff member not know about a project that we're doing within the city when they're asked, even by a family member, someone walking down the street, hey, what's happening on Howard Street? I don't know. I don't know what's happening. So making sure our staff is educated on our projects. Obviously, you all will be educated on our projects. So when you're approached in the city, you can talk about what's happening, about the priority of the project, why we're doing the project, what that project entails, and be able to have that conversation with your colleagues and constituents. So in 2024 capital overall, 8.3 million total. That's with all general fund and enterprise funds combined. And then when we boil that down to the general fund capital, that's just over $800,000 of capital projects that we have currently. And we won't go through that this evening, but if you look at the front end of the documents, the financials on how do we determine what type of what amount of capital we can support from a revenue standpoint. There are, Audrey went through an analysis at the front end of your folder on the assessed values from a taxing standpoint that we have. What do we expect to get in the city? As you know, the period between 2008 and 2012, we lost a substantial amount of taxable value. We have, over the course of many, many years, we've recovered that loss, and we're projecting about a 4% growth. That's we budget obviously very conservatively, and we certainly hope that it comes better, and we expect it to come better than that, but we don't want to over promise and under deliver, if you will. So that front end kind of gives you that basis. We're right in the ballpark of about being able to support $550,000-ish in general fund capital. So you can see at the 810,000, we're a little bit above that. If you rewind a little bit into 23, the current year, we're not going to be able to get all those projects done for a variety of reasons. Labor issues, contractual issues, cost of material issues. And I always tell staff, just because this plan potentially will at some point get approved and our operating budget ultimately will get approved, when we flip the calendar over to January 1st, doesn't mean that it's the wild west and we have all these resources that we can just spend without any care in the world. So we're still going to manage this budget and be very frugal with the budget. If it looks like, even as we turn the calendar, it just timing wise, this does not make sense to do this project right now for, again, cost issues. We've bid projects out, and Kendall will talk about Winter Sports Park roof project. We had one bid and it was well over our budget. It did not make sense to do that project this year. So we're going to get it back out on the street this fall, try to time it to maybe where it makes most sense. Obviously, we do a lot of our bidding process over the winter, so we can work with contractors to get their schedule lined up before they get busy. It doesn't make sense to do a lot of bids in the middle of summer when contractors are already booked up for typically the rest of the year. So we try to get our bids out, in the fall and winter and get on a contractor schedule very early on. So we're going to try that project again, Winter Sports Park. So you're going to see that project happen again. You're also going to see a project in here that's developer dependent. And Mike will talk about that project. but we have to plan for those things. If we don't know, if a developer, if things line up for a developer and now we have a viable project and now all of a sudden we don't have the resources set aside to upgrade our water service, water mains in that area to be able to serve that development effectively. So we have to plan for those, but in some cases it's completely developer driven, and so it's earmarked, it's set aside. But if it's not a viable project, even into 24, we will continue to kind of hold that project in bay for now. So Mike will talk about that as he steps forward. A significant amount of grants in the 24 budget, and again, that's kudos to our staff. They are diligent, and they will bird dog these grant opportunities, and they do a great job of that. I would love to get to the point where we're at a point in our budget that maybe we don't have to be so reliant on grants. We'll always have a need for grants, and they're outstanding. But sometimes grants also cause us to delay projects because of some grant requirements, because of waiting for the grantor to get us certain information. So now by waiting, now the price of the project has escalated in cost. So ideally, it'd be great to get our maybe a little less reliant on grant dollars, but certainly we're not ever going to get to a point where we're going to pass up grant opportunities. We'll continue to look at those as we move forward. So schedule wise, as I mentioned, we've started this process as a staff in June. We've got this document at a point where it's in front of you. We put it out on our website on August 1st, asking for any feedback. We provided our city email account, general email account, to provide citizens an opportunity to provide any feedback on the document, and we will continue to have that open and available for the public to review and comment. And obviously, we'll pass any sort of comments on to each of these bodies as we move forward. So tonight, obviously, the 8th of August, this is our combined meeting, and I will say again, we're a redevelopment ready community, and RRC requires combined meetings, at least one in a calendar year. This is our second combined meeting. So again, thank you for that opportunity to get together. We're able to check a box in RRC, which is always exciting to be able to do that. So thank you for that. And then, so next week on the 16th, this document will roll forward on the Planning Commission's agenda for review and possible recommendation on to City Council, which would be the following week at their August meeting. If we're able to actually accomplish that, that would be about a month ahead of what we did last year, which would be outstanding. That certainly gives us time to then move on to the operating budget. So I think it's also important to say that this approval of the CIP does not authorize any funds. That actually happens when the operating budget is adopted. Really, the operating budget will take the 2024 allocation within the CIP, and we'll merge that into the operating budget. That is when resources will become available. Once that operating budget is adopted, we'll pull in those resources from the 24. But this adopting the 24 operating budget does not allocate anything beyond 2024. So we're really going to focus our attention tonight on 24 and 25. Once we get further in, I mean, it's a great tool, and I'm not trying to throw any shade at what we're doing here with a 6-year document, but we can't control what happens, down the road, whether it's another. I'm not even going to say all the scenarios. We can all think of scenarios on our own, but so we're going to try to focus our attention on the first 2 years of this plan, and that's what you're going to see staff go through as well. But certainly the plan dives into multiple years, and the plan in its entirety will be approved ultimately. But we're really going to focus again on the things that we can hopefully control over the next couple of years. So just a quick breakdown. As you can see, the general fund is about 10% of the overall capital improvement plan. The enterprise funds, which are the streets, electric, water and sewer, are the 16, the 15, the 12%. So majority of these funds are coming from our streets, electric, and water and sewer fund. And then obviously grant funds. This is a big year for grants, mainly because we're pulling 1.3 million. And let me get to that next slide because I think that'll show you a little bit better. So the bottom one, the grants, almost $3 million in grants are projected for 24. And those two big items are driving that. 1.3 million for the Winter Sports Park Pavilion project. I think our latest is just over $1 million. Kendall, are we at $1 million?
We're at 900.
900. So we still got a ways to go there. So that is a big part of that 2.9. And then we were just awarded 800,000 for the Wheelway project. And again, I mentioned this last night, and I'll mention it again. That 800,000 does not get us a completed wheelway. Contrary to what you may have read and what was dispersed throughout the media, in some ways, it sounded like that 800,000 would essentially build the trail, which unfortunately is not the case. I wish it was, but essentially that will get us a bid-ready package from an engineer and design standpoint when we're all done, and then the big number will be, we'll know what that number is, and we'll be able to make sure that we respond accordingly. So that's what, those are the numbers that are within the budget as we have currently. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kendall as we talk through each individual fund. This would be buildings and grounds. Kendall, you taking this, or Rock, do you want to take this one?
I can.
Okay. Any questions yet as you are working through the document before Rock comes up?
You go, Mace.
You can go right there if you want.
I'm good right here. I don't know if I can get out of here. Thank you, everyone. Public safety, east and west exhaust extraction system. I was able to look back in our records and find that Director Breed in 2017 had tried some grant funding for this. Essentially what these systems are is they hook up to the exhaust on each truck. So when we do our daily checks, we run the trucks for 15 to 20 minutes that we have to check off, because that charges all of our air brakes and things like that, the functionality of the truck. You combine that over years and years of doing it, especially in the wintertime when it's cold out. We try and run the tubes right now that sit on the exhaust out the door. The wind just blows the exhaust back in. So this system would reduce the respiratory disease down the road, as well as lung cancer and the carcinogens that our public safety officers are enduring on a daily basis within our facilities. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Where does the exhaust go?
So it goes, it's an extraction system. There's a tube that hooks up to the exhaust and it pushes it out the top of the building. So it's a big tube. I think we have a slide.
Next slide.
Yeah. There it is. You can see it hooks on as like a magnet. And when the truck leaves the station, the magnet is released. And you can see in the top of the building there, it pulls it out and pushes it into the atmosphere outside of the building.
So what is the current situation with exhaust? There is no system.
Right now, we don't have a system. No, we open the garage doors and or if it's or pull the trucks out and run them outside if we can. We try to have that happen, but sometimes inclement weather and things like that in northern Michigan, we we just have to run the trucks inside, crack the doors, wait for everything to, when we're done running them, we'll shut them down and then to kind of have a cross air flow with the doors open.
Some OSHA like recommendations or industry recommendations, it would seem to do this?
Yes, most southern departments have a lot of these. Where I came from in Bloomfield, we had this installed when I was down there. It's we had good luck with these systems. We have officers at times working out in the hose tower running stairs while there's trucks running in there, things like that. So these are the things we're trying to avoid and educate. However, there are certain times where we just have to run the trucks inside, which, as you can imagine, is very unsafe for the officers. And I believe the two quotes, one was for 2 systems out at Station 2, Station West, for 2 exhaust systems, and the other being a little bit more was for 3 at Station 45 here next door. Any other questions? Okay. Still me, okay. What do we have next? Okay, the also our firing range, and it says upgrades. Truthfully, what our issue is with our firing range, I don't think, I'm guessing it's been maybe 12 to 15 years since we had all of the rubber replaced, as well as all of the lead removed. And if you want to go to the next slide. So you can see on the bottom right how everything is starting to protrude. We've put other like rubber patches on there to try and keep everything from bubbling out on us, basically. But this would, we would have to have a company come in and remove all of the rubber off there, get the lead removal as well, and replace the rubber. And your slide to the left is to have our floors at Station 45 epoxied. We've had a couple quotes on that. They said our floors are in decent shape now, where there is not a lot of patching that would have to be replaced. And just kind of with everything, the longer we wait on epoxying and redoing the flooring, the more things are going to cost, the more repairs they're going to have to do. So. Yes.
Just a question on the range, and would the replacement be the same kind of technology for the shooting range?
It is.
No,
Yeah,
it's not something newer.
There's plenty newer, but cost effective wise, and for our situation, I mean, this has worked for numerous years. They have things, bullet traps and whatnot that you can put in a lot of those. There's ups and downs for every system. And this has seemed to work really well for a lot of years. I believe there's close to 15,000 rounds in this system here. And I couldn't tell you the last time that this was professionally done. It's been numerous years. That might be a better question for Director Breed. I'm not even sure if he would know, but it's been numerous years. We've just kind of been patching things. We did have a lieutenant at one time take it upon himself to take this apart and get all of the lead out, and he probably has a horn in the middle of his head right now. So regardless, it's we did I believe 5 or 6 bids on this one, and they were all pretty similar. Any questions on this? No.
Yeah, I want to back up one.
Okay.
Yeah, so just going back, the Carnegie Building, we do have that in 25. As you know, right now, the library is undergoing a significant tuck pointing and facade improvement project. They had the Carnegie Building included in that project, and it just kind of blew the library's budget. I'm not 100%, and maybe we'll obviously continue to research this, you know, who who's responsible ultimately for the Carnegie building? Is it the city? Is it the library? But I told Val that I would take that off her plate and scour for grant opportunities to. This also needs some significant tuck pointing. The brick or the front concrete stairs are in need of some repairs as well. As well as some interior improvements, windows and such. So we will be looking at some, there's a grant currently that we're going to be applying for community resource center type projects. So there's a number of community groups that utilize the building. So I think we have a good, we'll have a good application once we put everything together. So that project would only move forward if we're successful getting grants, or obviously we earmark funds for that specifically. But so I wanted to include that in the plan. Number one, we needed it in the plan to apply for the grant opportunity. It needed to be shown that it was a priority in our capital improvement plan. So it's there, it's a placeholder, but we obviously need the grant funds to make that a viable project at this point.
Okay, so we'll go to the Parks and Special Facilities section on page 11. We'll start with the Pennsylvania Park upgrades. This was a grant that was written in 2021 as the final section of the original corridor proposal. This includes widening the sidewalk on the back side of the buildings adjacent to Penn Park. There was a $150,000 land and water, conservation fund grant that was approved, recommended in 2021, and then we approved it in fall of 22. The funds that are supporting this are DMV, streets, electric, and again, the $150,000 land and water conservation fund. So we're in the process of finalizing design for state approval with a proposed bid late winter to get that on contractors' schedules for as early as we possibly can next year, so we can get the project completed before it gets too busy downtown. The next is if you recall, the beginning of this year, we updated our park and recreation master plan. We had some incredible public comment and feedback on these. So the plan is over the next few years to master plan our parks, to have an idea that when grants come up or when funding becomes available, we have a head start on park design, of which then we will go through more of the public process. But what we do with these master plans is we take a lot of the feedback that was received from the master plan update process, and we apply those into these plans. And when we are ready for the next step, then we have a good idea of initial direction. The winter sports park roof and windows. Shane alluded to this a little bit ago. We bid out the roof. We had one bid, and we separately bid out the windows, and we had 0 bids. So it's difficult to try to procure contractors. So we are going to take a different approach. We're going to include the Bates roof as well as the winter sports park roof, and then also windows. And we'd like to rebid that this winter so we can get it in front of contractors and not have such a tight deadline for completion. If we can spec that out to where contractors can complete the project by the end of 2024, that may be the way to go to get some of these projects done. I know that the windows were close to 12 weeks out when we bid this, and I think that may have been an issue. I know and bid on it. Plus, most of the contractors are extremely busy anyway. So we're going to just take a different approach and hope for a better result. The Winter Sports Park Pavilion project, as Shane mentioned. Oh, I'm sorry, Lindsay.
Could you consider like an outfit like All Weather Seal? They're like heavy on the residential promotion. We got like 3 or 4 houses on Emmett right now that are doing new windows. Is that an option for commercial buildings?
It would be an option if they would bid on it.
No, they come to you.
Well,
And then they make custom everything.
I guess
They do commercial though. I think it's probably just residential, right?
you're talking windows or roof.
All Weather Seal does both.
We have, the purchasing policy that we also have to follow. So the intent on when we bid things out is to basically give contractors kind of the idea, what we are looking for. If it's standing metal seam, if it's asphalt, if it's rubber, from the, I'm no windows expert. That's why we had someone else write the spec for that, because if we're going to invest that kind of money, I want to make sure we're getting a good product with a high R value. And so that some of these bids take some time to write. So I'm not going to say it can happen, but we provide them specs. If they come back with us, we always accept alternative bids that if they're a similar product that we can that we could also consider. So there are ways to do it.
I just have another question. So if you're gonna do the base seal roof, is that also dealing with the erosion that's happening? Would that be corrected with like drip edges or something?
Yeah, both of these.
Erosion on the sides of the building.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Both of these roofs, when we did put the specs together for the Winter Sports Park roof, it did include downspouts, gutters, and drainage to help with some of the erosion. And the same would be the case for Bates, because we do have quite a bit of erosion and some water damage by the on either side of the building as a result of drainage off the roof.
Can I just ask a Windows question? There's lots of windows in this 6-year document. And certainly with regard to roofs, a failure is a big problem if it happens, because there's interior damage, structural damage. Windows, I suppose, but not quite as dramatic maybe and over time. I see lots of different window projects in this document. The question is, are they broken? Are they felt to be too inefficient? When you talk about inefficiencies as a homeowner, you're often presented with, you could get something more efficient. And then you look at the time to pay it off, the cost benefit, and it can be, with prices now, extremely long. Can you just generally comment on that?
Sure, I can comment to particularly the Winter Sports Park and Rock Director Carr rather could talk more a little bit regarding the public safety. The Winter Sports Park windows, some of them don't even seal. They don't even close. The seals are broken. Some of the frames are deteriorating. It's very difficult to keep it warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And we have our day campers there all summer long, and sometimes it's cooler outside than it is in the building. Because some of the windows don't open, some of them don't close. And then conversely, in the winter time, it's difficult to keep the heat in. So there was a grant that I did receive from Eagle. I believe it was $20,000 to put towards this project that expires next year. So that's the focus why I'm trying to get the Winter Sports Park windows. But yeah, they're in pretty poor condition if you get up close to them. And then
I can speak for at Station 4 or 5. We have gaps in the sill plates that go around the window. We have duct tape on one of the windows that's keeping it from falling apart. There's several of them that are, the hose tower, we have one that's, it's hooked to a ratchet strap to keep it shut right now, so they're in pretty rough condition.
Okay.
I'm gonna back up just a minute. If you recall, in 2021, we went through a needs assessment process, and we had architects come in, and landscape architects come in through the Mike MC Smith and Associates out of Grand Rapids, and they went through every park, they went through every facility we had and provided us some feedback as to, okay, these are the things we need to do now. These are the things you need to do in 1 to 5 years, and then these are the things we need to do from 6 to 10 and on. So when you're seeing some of these facility projects, these are being driven by the feedback that we received from the study, from the needs assessment.
Kendall, can I ask a question? It's an adjunct to what we're talking about, but I wondered about the ARPA funded, snowmaking machines and that infrastructure. Is that something that's going to happen in 2024 or?
No, we're planning to do that yet this year.
Thank you.
Sure. The Winter Sports Park Pavilion project, again, was a land and water Natural Resources Trust Fund grant. We're looking at a $1.4 million price tag. If you recall, this was a recipient of the Petoskey Rotary 100-year celebration project, and that snowballed, and that money was used to leverage matching funds for trust fund, which was received and recommended and approved. That was approved administratively last year. So these grants do have sunsets. So we've been raising funds over the last year throughout the community. Earlier this year, we received $150,000 from the Great Lakes Sports Commission. I am going to, in fact, I think I did, or I'm going to, I can't remember my grants, kind of, I get confused with all the grants that we've done, but there's a $250,000 grant that I was submitted this year through the Passport program, and then an additional $300,000 ask to a foundation. So there's another, $450,000 that's out there yet. I'm waiting for response on that, and that could really get us over the hump. The concern is, again, as Shane referenced, when we have these, we identify the project, we go through the grant project. It could be 2 or 3 years before we actually do the project, and in the meantime, the cost of everything has risen. So while we have our fundraising goals, those kind of keep raising up a little bit with the price of everything that by the time we this kind of started as a $600,000 project, and then it was a $900,000 project, and now we're looking at more. I mean, my goal is to try to have $1.5 million raised by the time we bid this project out. So that 100,000 basically shows a commitment by the city as our contribution to the project, because to this point, the city has not committed any general fund, because the grants that were received were leverage money from other donations, if that makes any sense.
Can I just ask a question then about, so resurfacing is in this proposal. Has there been any discussion, I'm sure there has, and it certainly would be cost, about an active cooling system to extend season?
It's been discussed. It's money,
Right.
really, is what it boils down to, because that is going to require a lot more power than what we have likely in outbuilding. In expense when you lay the concrete down with piping. I mean, we'll build what we can afford to build. And there's also products out there now that will overlay a rink and act as a chiller.
Okay.
Where you didn't have to have all of the the piping requirements, you know, on the onset. I can tell you that when I was in Portage, we did have an outdoor rink, an outdoor skating surface, and it was expensive to run. The utility costs monthly were, if I recall, $15,000 a month to run that. And if we did have an issue with a burst pipe that was in the concrete, so we had to chip up the concrete and fix the pipe. So technology is kind of caught up to where you can retro if we ever get to the point where we want to have an extended season with the chiller system. There's things that we can do without implementing that into the design of the rink.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The Little Trappers resurfacing. This will be a perpetual capital improvement item. It's kind of like painting a bridge. We have 7 miles, 8 miles to do. We have some good sections. We have some not so good sections. So every year we will add on to where we did the year before, or we will look at a section that is in worse shape, like we are this year. There's a section down by the tunnel in Bay Harbor that's in really bad shape. So we're skipping ahead a little bit, but I feel we're addressing the worst section. So this is something that we need to continue to commit to have a good wheelway.
And is this normal wear and tear? Is there tree roots? Do you have any idea of what are some of the causes of the disrepair?
So yes to both. We have in areas where there's a lot of shade, we have more tree root issues. Some of the areas that are 20 years old that are in the open sun actually hold up pretty good. There's usually after 20 years or so they'll start to crack and the edges will start to chip off. There's preventive maintenance that we do every year in terms of root cutting. So we try to go down the trail to cut the roots to buy us some time. But at some point, Mother Nature is going to win. And if if concrete wasn't so expensive, concrete would be a much better product, but we wouldn't get nearly the surfacing amount that we do with asphalt. So they're heavily used, but primarily it's the blistering that comes up with the weeds, and if that water doesn't get off it, that seems to be where the biggest issues we have on the trail. And then the Wheelway slope restoration project is the $800,000. This is our match to the $800,000, rather to the $1 million proposal. So moving on, the resource center, and these last two come from the TIFA fund, the resource center landscaping improvements. We'd like to add some more hard surfacing, redo the landscaping, and try to improve. That area was really devastated, if you recall, a few years ago when we had those storms. We lost some pretty good sized trees, took up a lot of landscaping. So we're to the point now where we really need to kind of start over. And plus the concession stand is busy and we have tournaments every weekend down there. And this would be a nice area to add some more hard seating around the resource center. And Sunset Park improvements. This was an idea that we had before we had all the high water issues. We had this project. Basically, we diverted this project. We kind of took this project off the books to help with our shoreline improvement. We had several $100,000s worth of shoreline improvement that we had to do when the water was so high. So this is in my opinion, a needed improvement. We would improve the view shed. We would add some pathways through Sunset Park, provide some nice accessible seating, and improve the fencing and the landscaping. Yes, sir.
Question on Bateman Park, I can't remember if the pedestrian tunnel under 31 is part of the tip of area or separate, but I noticed on the downtown side of the tunnel, there's some concrete deterioration that's happening up there on the edge of the highway. I don't know if that's the city's responsibility or is that not?
That is the city's responsibility, and we're looking for a solution for that, because we need to, yes, on the way, we do need to patch that. Yep.
Kendall, if I could, I just wanted to make a comment on the water issues and high water issues. I had gone to a conference on that, and you know, what's striking is we were at a high, but not we were within an inch, I think, of the all-time high. And there's a cycle, as you know, and it at times was a 20-year cycle, although the recent cycle was shorter. 5 feet or so of Lake Michigan. So what bothers me, and it far precedes you, so it's great, but my understanding when I saw that and we were at a normal high-end cycle is how did we in the past, but we have to move forward. Moving forward, that will absolutely happen again because Lake Michigan absolutely does that through many, many decades. So that was not abnormal or unusual. It will happen. And so we had some infrastructure maybe at risk, almost like somehow it wasn't envisioned that, or maybe it was just a miss on what the structure would handle. So just.
You mean the shoreline?
Right. So I mean, I'm sure moving forward, that's a high priority to now kind of embrace the idea that those levels will come back at some point periodically.
Learned a lot about high water a few years ago. So yes, we went from a 30-year cycle to a 5-year cycle.
Right.
And it's going to happen again. And when we're now at average water levels and this the sentiment is people have kind of forgot what we were going through.
Yeah.
So
we were ready to had to re-dredge the marina, I think.
in 2012.
Yeah.
We dredged, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm hoping we don't get to those levels, you know, I hope it doesn't go down that far, but I hope it doesn't come up that far again, but you're right, it will.
Right.
And in 2025, there is a project that addresses high water a little bit differently.
Good.
So here are some pictures. I probably should have been sharing these as I was talking. So those are the Winter Sports Park roof. The doors and windows. We also, as part of this project, are going to add some more ADA accessibility with electric powered door openers, a little bit more turnaround space. Okay, that's Bates concession roof. Oops. All right. Here's an example of what we have to deal with on the rear row. Resource center landscaping. It's time. Sunset Park improvement. That's what we have now. We have a drinking fountain that's is not accessible by anybody. We have a lot of nice, beautiful green space, but there's really no way to get there. We have the overlook, which needs to be rehabbed or relocated or whatever. But this will be a nice improvement to that part. And we also have some view sheds that we'd like to clean up and so
if I could comment on that, I'm looking at a blue spruce in a view shed. That tree is going to grow 150 feet, 50 feet in diameter. And I'm glad you talked about view sheds. We've had previous people comment on that, consultants to the city, Hyatt Palma, about how critical our view sheds are at that park as you drive just on the highway by town. And some of that falls in your purview, because that's where a lot of the stuff is growing in.
Sure.
Parkland.
And there's that balance that we have to respect the view shed, but we also have to respect what the vegetation is doing to stabilize the shoreline and the banks, and gets a lot of wind off the lake, so there's that balance that we can achieve, but there's a lot of scrubs, and there's a lot of undergrowths and things that we can, not only at Sunset Park, but in other areas throughout the city. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to 2025. Again, we have some winter sports park interior renovations. We have again, a lot of times the winter sports park lodge is referred to the new building at the winter sports park. It was remind people that it was built in 1992. So it's like your own home. After a while, you have to do some renovations. So this is going to focus primarily on the concession stand. We need new flooring and restroom updates. Bates Interior is kind of the same thing with concession stand upgrades, scores booth, that area, and improvements to the bathroom. Tennis court resurfacing. These are for the upper tennis courts, the ones that were built in 2017. It's best practice every 7-8 years to go through and resurface. Would say resurface. It's repainting, resurfacing and repainting and restriping. So it isn't redoing. Master.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The resurfacing, that's at the high school, right?
Upper.
The upper.
Yep.
So is that a city court then, or is that a school court?
It's a shared court.
A shared court? Could you expand on that a little bit?
So we have an agreement with the school where we share facilities. So the school manages facilities through the school year, and then we manage them in the summertime, and then we share capital costs.
For just the tennis courts, or for all?
For the tennis courts, for Turcotte, for the lower tennis courts. That's about it there.
So it's a similar question. So, but we pay for the resurfacing, or are we sharing the cost?
We share the cost. We share the cost with the schools, yes.
Okay.
Even split?
Yeah. Yep, it's a 50-50 split.
So we can look forward to a similar budgetary number year after year as these facilities need upgrading or need modification somehow. But not just the upper courts, so it's an expanded list.
At the high school in particular?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the whole lower courts are gonna have to be redone. And so that's a bigger discussion that we need to have with the school. Don't really have a timeline on it, but there's different ways to pay for that. It may be a bonding from the school, it may be a sinking from the school. That the city will, look at reimbursing them. That conversation isn't mature enough, to discuss, but when we talk about Turcotte, we share costs on updates and capital projects there as well. So if we can just stay ahead of it, then we get, we'll have 12,500 instead of
Something in the budget every year.
likely.
Yeah.
Likely.
Okay, thank you.
Master plan similar to the last conversation. We're looking at some more. Riverview Sports Complex, proposing a restroom addition out there. It's a heavily used park. The downtown Greenway extension, this is just for an engineering to pick up at Emmett Street to Baxter. This could complement the lots at Lumber Square project. We thought it would be a good idea to just get the design and engineering done. So if there is funding available, that we can expedite it. The marina parking lot resurfacing for $100,000. This has never been done. We've had a lot of infrastructure improvements down there. Most recently, the fuel storage tank, which is 20,000 gallon. we ripped up the concrete, we patched it, and ideally, this is also supported with a waterways grant. And then our wheelway resurfacing again, it's the same as we had in 2024. The Bayfront East, as we call it, kind of the Arboretum area, we're looking at there's a potential for a $2.5 million federal grant for this project, which does address water fluctuation, where we would install a livable shoreline. We would convert the land to more of a pollinator conversion with some birding areas that would be all interpretive, and we would relocate the trail farther inland to further protect it from any further erosion. So we're going away from more of the armored look in the armored design to more of a livable shoreline. And the best example I can use is when we recently did the Solanas Beach improvement. All throughout the high water area, the damaged area that we had on the shoreline was the Solanas Mission Beach, which does not have any armor in front of it. So we're looking at trying to implement this livable shoreline project down there. And this is I think this is a pretty realistic grant opportunity. I've had a few conversations, and we've submitted a letter of intent to Eagle, who has reached out and said this is going to be one that they're looking to submit to NOAA, which is a federal funding program. And then lastly, there's our pedestrian bridge, which is right out here, is in dire need of replacement. And that is a TIFA project. The decking, what did I say?
Well, the bridge.
Not the bridge itself, no. We can't do that for 25,000, but we think we can get new wood on it to stabilize it. So this is the bridge that we're talking about. Bridge itself is good, but the wood, it's time.
Would you consider it like composite?
I would if there was a price point. Yeah.
You know, if I could, I had a question, just on the, I am a marina user on the marina parking lot. I know that there are some patches down there. It's funny, when I drive through there, I just went through there again today, I've never once said to myself, this parking lot's falling apart. It's old, for sure, you pointed that out. It doesn't seem terrible to me. My only comment is, when you, not only is the obvious cost of doing these things, and there's the marinas, that would be from marina funds, correct, boaters. And you said potentially grants?
Potentially.
It's just, if we do something and maybe asphalt in my mind doesn't fail catastrophically. It slowly cracks and gets worse and worse, and over years you have some time. So it just, once you do this, then you start another, whether it's going to be 15, 20, even 30-year cycle. So I'm just a little worried we're fixing something that isn't that bad, and then we start another cycle, we'll have to replace it again. Just, am I missing something, or?
No, it's a parking lot that we probably should have been seal coating on a regular basis. I don't think that has been done, and perhaps I actually have a call into Reese Riley to see if there are other options other than.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so there could be some other options, but what I want to do is, I don't want to get to the point where the parking lot is an issue. And if there's things we can do as a preventative maintenance to prolong the life of it, then that's what we will do.
So I will reveal my ignorance, since I've only been here for a year and a half, but when I see budgetary numbers assigned to developing master plans,
Mhm.
do we bid that out, or how does that happen?
So we generally work on master plans with Beckett and Rader. And we would again take the results of our master plan and put a, based on the public comment and staff comments, we would design these, I say design, but we would put amenities and parks as we would basically draw them in. And then when grant dollars or funding comes up, then we have something to start from instead of starting from scratch. So it isn't something that we would bid out.
So they like derive what they do from the material you provide them. That's how they develop.
Correct.
I got it. Thank you.
Kind of with Arlington Park, the children's garden. I noticed I saw that's a later 2026, I think, or 2027. Is that as part of the delay in that, or was that always the plan for that to be later on, or is it want to get that master plan for Arlington Park first before we?
I'd love Arlington Park to go next year, to be real honest. We're waiting to get some final pricing for the children's garden. And then we have to get with the garden club and the city and really get a plan to fund it.
Okay.
So it's there in 2026, but it's like Shane said, this is kind of a fluid document. If we end up getting funding prior to 2026 to develop that, then that could be something we see earlier.
Okay, great.
You know, if I could, a follow-up or previous question really on Pennsylvania Park. So we've got a master plan process coming up, or going to be bid out, it sounds like.
Not bid out.
Or developed.
Correct, based on
Upcoming, that's upcoming, correct?
Yeah.
But there's some work with sidewalks or something in the interim.
Well, the project that we talked about,
Right.
for that was already part of the plan from the beginning. So
You think it for sure will be consistent with the eventual master plan?
I do.
Okay.
And that was part of the original corridor master plan. You know, from the early 2000s, I believe, is when that was developed. So the improvement to Penn Park won't have any effect on the master plan for the rest of the park.
Okay. It was just concerned because it seemed like we were going to get a master plan, but yet we were doing some improvements before that. That was.
It's the portion along Park Avenue.
Okay.
The sidewalk.
Just the sidewalk.
Just the sidewalk
Yeah.
is along the building, on
Okay.
one edge of the park.
So if you will, the whole interior of the park is open for whatever plan.
Correct.
Comes out.
Yep.
I think one thing to keep in mind, and this is I still feel like I'm somewhat of an outsider to Petoskey, so don't throw anything at me yet, but I think we need to reimagine where the Christmas tree is. I think that Christmas tree is, how do I say this politely? It's dated, it's ugly, it's so having some sort of plaza around a tree that we can all celebrate and enjoy. And I know when Mike's crew decorates it, they struggle. So I think that's part of the master planning process. Hopefully that we can create a plaza area that will be much improved and that we can all enjoy during the Christmas season. That's one option.
Do you know, as you know, Harbor Springs obviously has a tree brought in, cut.
Yeah.
We've had the tree, but apparently there's been some issues maintaining it to the size and shape that would look like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
So do you think all options are on the table? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the public engagement process. The community I grew up in, we also we have a sleeve in front of our courthouse that we bring a tree is donated by a local farmer. Maybe it's encroaching on a house or whatever that they need to get rid of, and it's volunteers, it's donated, we have a crane service that donates their time, and we celebrate, and create a whole parade of bringing it into town, and Consumers Energy donates their time to put all the support system around it, and we have a lighting, someone donates or is the sponsor to light the tree, and they provide that. So I mean, it's certainly something that as a community you celebrate and you gather momentum around. And certainly I think we have a candidate for a great tree in Sunset Park that Kendall's already had an eye on.
Too bad those windstorms a few years ago didn't make that decision for us.
Yeah.
You may need a break, and we're going to switch topics a little bit to get into some utilities and streets.
Another piece of pizza. There's a lot of pizza out there.
Yeah.
Need my glasses.
Yeah,
Yeah. You can.
I'll wait just a couple minutes.
Is this the driest part of it?
Thanks. Yeah. No, yeah, it can be dry, but we move a lot of water, I'll put it that way.
The other thing is, isn't it, for the marina, we had a tip down there. And that money has to be spent in a small area. And it's our marina funds that have accumulated like $3 billion, something like that.
Well, I don't know what the amount is, but it's a dedicated fund. Yeah.
It's for all city staff.
It's a dedicated fund to the marina. Weren't you looking at possibly if it were ordinance from the top of the dock? If we had to put it in the dock system, we probably could have a voting system wasn't what you were looking at. I wouldn't recommend it, you know? Yeah. We get, with the ice flow we get in there, I don't. Okay. I don't know. There, you could. We have utilities that run through them, so I don't see a floating system work out there. There could be, like Harbor Springs did, they actually built on top of their current dock. So I'd like, you know, there's the marina is a completely different conversation. There's a lot of things I'd like to do down there, so.
Roll it. Roll it. Yeah, let's see. I'll move quick. I'll just give it a couple minutes here and we'll roll it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Becky Goodman is not available this week, so I'm taking the parking because I've been working with Becky, the downtown director, on a couple of these projects. So the Seville lot improvements, and there will be some photographs after I get through this list that will give you some good visuals of why we're doing some of the improvements. But the Seville lot improvements, which is behind the Roast and Toast, we're looking at reconfiguring that particular lot. There's some guardrail that's in that lot that's beat up. It would be a pay station type setup. but it's being looked at as we speak to see, we have to meet compliance issues also with ADA compliant issues. And so all that's being looked at, but that was one that Becky had thrown out that needs to be improved. The parking lot modifications, landscaping.
Before you go on, I
Yep.
understand that. And I know this is downtown.
Yep.
and forth, but it showed in the detail $25,000 for the pay station.
Yep.
And I was curious to know if somebody's done a return on investment for that as opposed to the parking meters that could be reused and seem to be perfectly good.
That's probably a question for the downtown parking committee, but I broke that out just so we knew that it was going to be a pay station and the other dollars allocated were for the improvements of the parking lot, resurfacing, potential curb around the islands or whatever they may come up with. But yeah, that's something that Becky could probably answer. Yep.
For the record, if you sit in front of City Park having dinner, you really see a lot of frustrated tourists trying to deal with that
Okay.
machinery. So
Point taken.
I'm not a big fan.
Okay,
Parking meters seem to work really well, especially for 25 grand.
Mr. Buck.
Actually, gonna echo the same thing. It seems like I recall the current parking station, just in terms of visitors and their experience with that, it wasn't very favorable.
Okay,
So there's, obviously, it's maybe perhaps a little bit easier on the labor side of it. But I guess I would encourage us to have that a consideration in terms of how friendly we are with visitors and users of those parking lots. That, I think the meters are a more preferred route.
Just quick comment on that. Got a real good friend who just retired after 45 years in the parking industry. And he sent me, I said, you give us some recommendations. He wrote about 5 pages. I'm happy to share it with anybody. And he said almost everywhere across the country that they've worked, meters have gone out and they put pay stations in. And I continue to question things like that. What's convenient, what makes sense. I was a little shocked. I was in Naples, Florida for a couple of days in March. And the whole city's gone to the stations. And that's like in my mind, a big wealthier Petoskey. So anyway, considering both sides of it, I think makes sense.
yeah,
And I'll just say there's different types of stations. So if you travel around, you go to a different city, there's a different type of pay station than we have here in Petoskey that seem to be easier to use, more user friendly.
okay, we'll pass those comments along. That's all right. That's why we're here. Yeah, no, we will, we'll pass those comments along, absolutely. Yeah, so, yeah. So the parking lot modifications and landscaping, there's a couple of projects currently going on in the Livery lot and the Clifton lot off of Michigan Street. But the thought is that we would go to each of these parking lots and try to improve some of the landscapings. They were done years and years ago. I'm involved in this project because we have equipment areas from the electric that are in these lots also that were installed back in the mid-90s, and the landscapings around those equipment areas tie right into the parking lot improvements. So Becky threw some money out to enhance some of the parking lots, and we'll do that in conjunction with the electric. Pennsylvania Park upgrades, Kendall already talked about the walkway that was going to be widened. And this is the DMB's contribution, from my understanding, is the $50,000. The snow blower replacement with attachments, an ongoing discussion with the DMB on sidewalk treatments as far as snow removal and how can that be best accomplished. Public Works is involved in it only to the point that we maintain the equipment that they purchase. And the current piece of equipment that they have is a front snow blower only. And there is a new type unit that we're looking at in conjunction with the Downtown Management Board. That's a Ventrax unit that can have attachments such as a front broom for maybe early winter light snows with a salt spreader dropper on the rear, and also a snow blower that could be attached on heavy snows. Front plow, snow plow. So there's lots of options, but right now it's strictly a snow blower. And it has its challenges. I can tell you that, watching it and doing the repairs. So here's the Seville lot, parking lot behind the Roast and Toast adjacent to the Petoskey Plastics. There's the guardrail, recycling truck there in the background. For Lindsay.
Garbage disposal packer truck, that's a garbage. truck.
Okay,
I'm just saying.
I'm going to the right. Lindsay. Yeah, okay.
I'm looking dead square in the
Yeah.
middle.
All right, so moving right along, we're gonna jump into the streets. I did that for you, Lindsay. So streets and drainage, 2024. We got two things going on. I'm gonna start out with and I'll have photographs of all of these streets and projects once I get through this list. But we have the East Mitchell, from Division Street to the city limits that we're gonna be resurfacing. That street was resurfaced in 2008 or was reconstructed in 2008. And it's due for a resurface. This project is in conjunction with Emmett County Road Commission. They will be carrying the funding from the city limits to Division Road. So that's all through the small urban grant money through the state of Michigan. So we're working hand in hand with the county on that. Bayview Avenue, which is just at the city limits, East Mitchell to the dead end. And I'll get more into that with the photographs that are forthcoming. Our water main project is really driving that. Besides, the street is in rough shape. The miscellaneous pavement preservation, we're doing portions of Rose Street, Winter Park Lane, and Balsam Avenue. Howard Street, I'm going to take you downtown to the East Mitchell intersection with Howard, and head south on towards Michigan, but there's some sidewalk improvements that need to be done and some street work. I mentioned in the parentheses that rail removal within Howard Street and sidewalk area on East Mitchell. And I'll show you some photographs and why we're suggesting that those rails be removed. Emmett Street is on the docket potentially only if there's development on the East Mitchell to Michigan Street segment. And we have the villas that are on the, which is the old video club property and the 7-Eleven. To my knowledge, there's no movement on that site, but when there was movement, we had plugged in saying some improvements for water main and sewer upgrades. But I'll get into that with a photograph also.
Mike had a question. What portion of Rose Street, you know?
Yes, we're gonna start at Clinton, which is right at the base of the hill as you're going east on Rose.
Okay.
So you drop down the hill and we're doing that low area, but on the flat land, if you will, to the Winter Park Lane.
Okay.
And then, Mike, just real quick, is that based on the Pacer?
It is. There's a, yes, it is based on Pacer. Those streets that I'm gonna talk about are rated at a 2 to 3, which is very poor. They've been on our radar screen, and I'll get into some of the photographs and show you what these streets, how bad they are.
Mike, I had a quick question.
Yep.
And so I'm only asking because I live on Bay Street. And I believe in a previous capital improvement plan, Bay Street was on there.
Yep.
And when I look now, it says 2027 possibly. Is
Correct. That's realistic.
Okay.
And what we did the East Lake Street corridor in 2022, and we did all the side streets to Mitchell. And we're looking to do Bay Street in what I call a heavy construction year. It's a full reconstruct, new water main, new sidewalks, full right of way to right of way. And we do those every other year, just because there's not the money to just knock those out every year. So we do this resurfacing on even years that tie us to the MDOT small urban money, which we use for resurfacing. So I'm going to go real quick here on my mind, but we have the 2024, which I'm going through now. 2025 will be Howard Street. 26 would be another resurface, and then we'll get into the reconstruct in 2027, which would be the Bay. We will tie this into the Rose Street, hopefully, if there's funding available. all the way back up to Lake Street.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, you just had streets and drainage, Emmett Street, East Michelin, Michigan, $25,000. It's not much. What was that?
That's for the street only. What you'll see under water and sewer, there'll be money that's allotted for that street also, but that's 25,000 just for the resurface.
Just a research.
Correct. That's the street portion of that.
And then just point of clarification, did you say that water and wastewater situation there in conjunction with the redevelopment would only happen if that's going forward?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, and I'll just touch on that briefly, but if you look at the video club property and the 7-Eleven property, there are curb cuts that were established based on that business. We're not gonna go in and redo a street that we know has potential for improvement and replace curb cuts that we don't know where they belong. So it'll be a partnership with the developer when we redo that street. So we're throwing some money at the utilities and then also a little bit at the resurfacing, which may include some of the entrance towards Mitchell.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
as long as you're on that particular project.
Mhm.
Amy actually brought this before the planning commission for a general sense and feedback 3 years ago, I think it was, right?
Mhm.
And she did not get a favorable response for the designs that were submitted at that time.
Okay,
So at issue here is traffic control at the corner and whether one continues to allow left-hand turns there. Especially with the pedestrian crossover. So there are issues related to that particular project. When the time comes, it may be worth taking a look at that again.
okay,
So Mike, that was a discussion about actually changing the layout of the street.
Correct.
lanes.
Yeah.
But you're talking about just resurfacing.
I'm talking about if the developer, if and when they submit their plans, then we'll look at how best to make the street fit what they're proposing.
Yeah,
Which it could,
three quarters of there is basically undeveloped property. or
Correct.
Unused property right now.
correct,
So all that'll have a big impact on how that
Yeah.
intersection works.
yeah, so that will be looked at once things start to progress, but there's nothing that I'm aware of moving on the 7-Eleven property or on the villas at this point. So the miscellaneous sidewalk construction and replacement, we have a category that talks about the sidewalks and Bayview Avenue. This money will go towards Bayview Avenue. We're gonna extend the sidewalk north on Bayview Avenue up to the top of the hill towards the Winter Sports Park. There'll also be money that will be for replacement of existing sidewalks throughout the city in the Central Business District. And then we have sidewalk replacement at Howard and East Mitchell. And I'll show you photographs of what we're doing there. So there's, and the reason this gets a little complicated is because we have street funds, sidewalk funds, water funds, and sewer funds. So everything's kind of divvied up amongst the same project header.
Yeah, again, I couldn't agree with you more that the sidewalks need attention where the rails are and so forth, at
Yeah.
Howard Mitchell.
Mhm.
But one would assume that this would be in conjunction with the developer and the construction and not have to redo it after they get finished tearing everything up.
Correct. Correct.
Mike, I'm gonna comment on sidewalks maybe for Shane too. Don't we have is it a sidewalk plan or is it this non-motorized trail plan? But I always thought the CIP was a good time to pull that out. You know, we've got different sidewalk things mentioned here, but just to get one quick sense of where we're at in the city, high priority, medium and low priority.
Yeah.
And how we're addressing that in the plan. So maybe when we get to the next meeting, we could look at that briefly.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on that comment that on Kalamazoo, we addressed that, you know, as your comment, adding a sidewalk to the west side of Kalamazoo was important. That was part of the plan because of its proximity to the schools. So, Mr. Buck.
I keep kind of flipping back between the budgets and I'm trying to reconcile that with on the revenue side. And I'm thinking about a role that I could possibly play here in terms of helping with priorities. And when we talk about the general fund, for example, I kind of understand there's some, it can move around depending on funding and grants. When I think about some of the infrastructure projects here and the planning that's involved,
I don't get the sense that there's the same level of flexibility as some of these other things that we've talked up to this point. And I guess I would, as maybe a newer member, would appreciate maybe more of a higher level discussion in terms of the revenue side. Like, do we have a shortfall at this point? Are we kind of locked in towards all the funding for 2024? And if you could just kind of speak to that and maybe even tie it back to the on the revenue side there. And I don't think we have to get too much into the weeds, but I guess I just feel better knowing that the funding is locked in for at least next year.
Right, and I can speak to the revenue, our rates, electric, water and sewer, we have a set amount that we put aside every year for capital. So when the rate makers establish our rates, we have a specific number that we look for every year. So water and sewer is about $1 million, electric's about $1 million. And then we have the streets, which is the streets millage that generates, that goes up. Obviously, if we, have tax revenues go up. So we have to balance that with the lineal footage that we can actually do a street, and if that street needs utilities or not. If that makes sense. So what we do with, and I'll get into this a little deeper, but we tend to rebuilding a street, reconstructing it, if that's all we did every year with our water, sewer and electric funds and our street millage and major and local revenues, we're not going to get that far down the road. And pretty soon, 5 or 6 years down the road, we're going to maybe get, X number of blocks. So we do resurfacing as a best bang for our dollar that we can carry streets along for the next 5 to 6 to 10 years, depending on the treatment that we do give that street. And I'll show you some photographs here shortly that will kind of show what we've done in the past years, the last 25 to 30 years, to extend street life. Let the utilities ride along, if you will, because they haven't caused any problems. And then we readjust if we start having utility issues or water quality complaints or fire suppression, that we need to upgrade those utilities with the street reconstruct.
And for 2024, the funding for these projects that have been listed here, is that solid funding that's in place?
It is.
That's solid funding. Yes, electric. Yes, it is. Electric, water and sewer are very stable revenue stream based on rates. It goes as well as streets and also motor pool. General fund is always the one that we have to really assess each year and give and take depending on tax revenue and projects. But yeah, streets, water and sewer are very stable. You're welcome.
Funding mechanism for DPW, I always look at it as they're like self-sustaining. They don't ask for general fund dollars ever. And everybody else that does, that's where you have to hold those departments accountable because they're using tax funds for that. But like DPW, they sustain themselves because they do get money from the state and federal government.
Right.
On the odd years versus the even years. Those kind of things. I just look at DPW as like self-sustaining, so that's why they don't have a board that oversees them. They don't have to be managed in that same way because they generate their own revenue. They're self-sustaining.
And I will tell you that through our rate studies, I believe the last one was 2018, and the water just expired. I think this was the last year for that rate increase. Look, it's a battery.
No, you can only have 7 on and.
Oh, okay.
That one off.
But anyway, my time. So anyway, so we'll be looking at that, at those funds for, and we do try to utilize those funds for infrastructure improvements. We have a lot of water main and sewer lines and storm sewer lines that need replacement. But we're in good shape. The technologies that are out there change constantly, so we can do liners and we can videotape now. And so we can really focus on where we can get that dollar to stretch. So I'll go back here to streets and drainage, but on the last one here is Pennsylvania Park upgrades, and that's storm sewer. So that's the project that Kendall had addressed earlier, but the 120,000 is a storm sewer system that we're going to install under that sidewalk. And we are going to divert eventually roof drains that are tied to our sanitary sewers. We take an influx of stormwater when we have a heavy rain event in our main lift station and then ultimately at our wastewater treatment plant. So we will be installing a storm sewer under the sidewalk in conjunction with Kendall's project. That's what the 120,000 for is in streets. He had mentioned the electric, that'll be helping out with the street lights or the new sidewalk lights that will be installed. Okay, so here's some photographs. East Mitchell division to city limits. I did throw one in here on Hill Street that when we bid this project, we will be looking at if we can stretch the dollar to pick up Hill Street for some additional funding. We've talked to the state about this. It is considered a major street, and it's a candidate for a mill and fill. And a mill and fill, and that's what we'll be doing on East Mitchell. That again was built in 2008, heavily traveled street in Petoskey. It's 11,000 cars daily average, and the 2,000 cars break off on Kalamazoo and 9,000 come into the central business district. That's on average. So that's hence the reason that these streets are pretty well beat up. Here's East Mitchell. Looking east, you'll see some of the potholing that's occurring. And the picture on the right is actually the top course, we call it. This is a 3-course paving street. It was put in with MDOT monies. And there's 3 lifts of asphalt on this street. So it's a great candidate for a mill and fill. And we'll skim off the top and put a new top on it. We will be looking at the concrete crosswalks as you're going up Mitchell. Back up here. That must be the only 2 I have. But on Mitchell, if you drive Mitchell through the traffic shifts around the islands, you'll see the concrete crosswalks. And there's a thump there, as you all feel. We're removing those concrete crosswalks and we're going to put asphalt back in and let the mill run through. So it'll be a smooth transition. And then we'll paint stripe those crosswalks. We've already removed a couple a few years ago that were really bad, and then we're going to go ahead and remove the other ones either this fall or in the spring.
Somewhere, and I don't think it was in 24 or 25, somewhere I read in here that there was a plan to put the concrete intersection back in at, where is it?
Petoskey and
Mitchell, right.
Yep.
And are you happy with the way that the concrete intersections are holding up in the other? I mean, they're beautiful, the way that it's aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
But are you happy with the way they're holding up?
They're holding up okay. They take a beating just like any other intersection, but they are an element of the downtown streetscape. And I'm reminded periodically about the one that isn't there. And that's at the Petoskey and Mitchell. We haven't made any movement to replace it because we do have the 200 East Lake Street that has a lot of curb cuts that are still there that wouldn't be probably used today. So we don't really have any plans, but we put it in as a placeholder. Just to remind people that it's on our radar screen. And also MDOT did a mill and fill with the 2019 US 31 realignment. So it's got new asphalt as of 2019. So it's got some time it can ride along, but it's a placeholder, just that we haven't forgot it.
But your personal opinion, which holds up better for those intersections, asphalt or the concrete and then the pavers?
Well, one thing you'll get with asphalt is you'll get rutting and the asphalt will start to push. And if you get outside of those intersections next to the stop areas, we'll see that they'll start to wave. And that's rutting is what we call it, but it's because of heavy use and braking, which can occur. So
your preference is for the cement and for the land.
I think they are an element of the central business district, and that's what the streetscape design. Not that there isn't other designs that could be looked at.
But in this context, you're removing them because it's not in the CBD.
Right, these are just coming out because they're just, with the freeze thaw and the transition between the asphalt and the concrete is pretty typical over time. The asphalt will settle and the concrete will not, so you'll get that thump. And they actually right now are sort of blending in with the asphalt, with the color of the asphalt. So we're finding that if we paint them, paint stripe, that we refresh them every year. And we did that at the library during the 2019 mill and fill with MDOT. We removed the brick pavers and the concrete headers and we paint striped that. It was right on the edge of the downtown. So we talked to the library and everybody agreed that would.
Well, I have the same concerns maybe as Charlie did. You know, when I've seen these, I've seen the cracking and the issues at the junction of asphalt and cement. And I've seen the color from beautiful when it's put in to turn practically black with the tire marks.
Correct.
And it's like, why did we even do that? It seems like it'd be easier to put asphalt in.
Yeah, it would definitely be easier. Those concrete intersections are a lot of work to put in. But you know, they enhance the pedestrian crosswalk and they can be looked at.
I have a question about what will happen with Mitchell east of Bayview. Is that going to be worked on by the county
Yes, it will be.
at the same time?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, it's a joint project with the state.
Okay.
I have a question in regards to that. Where will traffic be rerouted?
We will use Wakazoo. I'm going quick here off my head. We'll most likely use State Street as a detour. We built the street in 2008. That's where the detour was listed. And I'm guessing we'll do the same thing. And we probably, to get through the East Mitchell Kalamazoo intersection, will divert cars down Hill Street. And the good news is the mill and fill goes really quick. So we'll stage it and phase it where we'll take, you know, from Division Street, maybe up to Kalamazoo, and then turn the mill back around and then maybe shift traffic at that point. So, but we're going to do this trying to avoid the school. So we're hoping, well, I know we won't do this before school is out, and we'll have it done before school resumes, because the school traffic out East Mitchell will be challenging. So we always try to do these a little early. So I'm going to say it'll probably begin sometime late June, early July. Yes, that's another, it will be, we won't interrupt the parade again. I hope.
Would you be willing to, when you talk to the state, ask them to put the manhole covers that go east of town on down to Division Road? It seems like they're all set in perfect line for the tire of the vehicle.
Yeah.
Could you suggest to them that possibly they shift them over 2 feet so they run down the hole, because the road is dead straight.
Right.
If they ran it down the middle, I wouldn't, you know, I see them going back and repairing their manhole covers because they're always in the tire track area. And it just seems like if you moved it over 2 feet, it'd be in the middle of the track. Is that?
They won't do that during a mill and fill, because but
Is that all?
that's all we're doing is a mill and fill. That's a mill and fill also. We are going to be raising structures on a couple of that are just east of Kalamazoo that have some low spots that need to be raised. So we'll be looking at that. One of the things real quick on why some of those structures end up in the travel lane, we call that. We have compliance issues with Eagle, with water and sewer have to be separated by 10 feet. So much separation horizontally and vertically. And then we have to try to get storm sewer in, which also has to have a clearance. So a lot of times it's driven by those utilities on where best we can make things fit and still meet the state compliance. So, but point taken, we try sometimes to. Right. Yep. So this is Bayview Avenue, East Mitchell, the dead end. I have this far slide on the left that this is really a water main driven project. In 2008, we went about a third of the way up Bayview Avenue. We extended an 8-inch new main tied to East Mitchell up the hill. And we need to get it to the top of the hill and get a loop tied back to Lincoln Place. So If you look at the dots that are in the middle of the red shaded zone, that is a water main installation that we're going to take the water main at the top of the hill and loop it over to Lincoln Place for circulation, fire suppression, and water quality. We're having some complaints up in that neck of the woods, and we have for years, but the street, as you can see, is deteriorated. Again, this resurfacing, this will be totally removed and repaved. We're going to put curbs up the street and a sidewalk on the west side, and that will go to the top of the hill and exit into the winter sports park. So we'll take it right up almost to the cul-de-sac area.
So is there currently a loop in the water main?
There is not. That water main goes up that hill and dead ends. There is one connector about midway up that takes it over to Lincoln Place, but the couple homes on the very end have their issues. Believe me, yeah. Yeah, you're on a dead end also. Yeah, I think we put a flusher in on that one too, didn't we? Yeah. Don't have any word to loop that one. That's a tough one. So this is Rose Street, getting back to where we talked about going to the base of the hill. Next time you're on Rose Street, just take a quick look at the curb on the north side. I think that's probably the main story here besides the condition of the asphalt. But the curb is actually tipping into the embankment. And if you get down close enough and drive it, we're going to pick that curb up and bring it back in a couple feet. We're going to narrow the street a little bit in order to keep the curb off the embankment. But there's some real issues with settlement on this street. So we're going to go after that and tie it into Winter Park Lane. This is Winter Park Lane. This is going to be what we call a crush and shape. There's no curb and gutter. It's starting to show signs of deterioration. We're cold patching the edges, but we'll come in and just crush this street, basically grind it all up, reshape it, and pave it back. It's that simple. Balsam Avenue, same thing. It's kind of a little quiet side street. It goes into the Highland House. There's a 24-unit apartment building that's tied to the street off Arlington. But again, that's just going to be a crush and shape and put a new top on it. Howard Street. This is downtown at Howard and Mitchell. This is the rails that are in the sidewalk. The photograph on the left is an aerial showing where we cut the rails off when the Greenway corridor was installed. So the rails used to go all the way to Emmett Street and beyond. We cut them off at Emmett Street, we moved them full length to Howard Street. So with what's going on at the Penny's corner, there is some much needed repair, but we've been dragging our feet. We threw some cold patch into the rail. The sidewalks broke up, and we're going to take it at least up to Mitchell at this point and remove. So there's monies in the sidewalk and there's monies in the streets to address both. We'll do a patch of some sort there.
Pull out the rails across Mitchell.
No, we're starting to resurface at Mitchell at Division by the library and going east. Yep. But someday I think what the goal would be is to remove the rails up to Pennsylvania Park and then let that discussion carry on with Kendall. Yeah. I think the rails they need to come out up to that point at a minimum, but it's they're obviously we're removing them behind us on the Emmett Street corridor. They've been removed to Fulton Street at this point. So this is the Emmett Street, East Mitchell to Michigan Street segment. This is again that development story, a developer story. If and when they come forth with plans of what they are proposing there, I know the villas have had plans, but we don't have any idea what's in store for the 7-Eleven. But there is water main needed and some sanitary work that's needed. And again, you can see the new sidewalk that we turned the corner with the downtown entrance project this fall, and we'll pick that up at some point and carry it on if something happens. 2025, we're getting close here. So 2025 is the big reconstruct. So that's Howard Street. reconstruct from Sheridan all the way down to Michigan. And there's some real issues on this street with some utilities. Storm sewer at the base of the hill down by the post office is a real problem for surcharge. When we have heavy rains, we have to get it to Michigan Street where there's a big storm sewer. Water main would be a full reconstruct from top to bottom. And sidewalk. This is the limits. We're picking up a small segment of Washington Street. In 2017, we did Emmett Street, and we did about halfway up Washington because of water main issues. So we're going to pick that water main up on Washington and tie it to the new Howard Street. This is just some of the street and the fixes that are needed. And you can see the sidewalk on the left and some of the alligatoring in the center, but I wanted to focus on the right. You'll see that this street's had an overlay. Some of this talk that I've been talking about mill and fill, they did this back probably in the late 80s, maybe early 90s, but you can see that the asphalt is on top of the pan of the curb. So we can't go out and do this again on this street. It's already seen this mill and fill. And utilities are in much need to be replaced. All utilities. The electric's been working on it off and on, and this will be a 2025 project. Gonna go through real quick on the electric. 2024, there's lots of little pieces of electric going on next year. Portions of Howard, Jefferson, Waukesoo, Fulton, Petoskey, Grove, Hill Street to the Methodist Church, which I'll get into that a little bit, but the Morgan, Preby, and Hillcrest. What we've been doing over the last 25 years is installing underground electric in this city. And a lot of the electric undergrounding projects, we have these big Jennings Avenues and the Lake Streets, and we take the electric further. We go, they just can't stop where we stop. So they continue on maybe a block, maybe two. East Lake Street last year, we went all the way to Rose. Rose is underground, Bay Street's underground. But there's these little pieces that have been kind of left because they went so far this year, then 10 years ago, they came this far. We're going to start tying that underground system together and working with Charter and AT&T. That's why you're seeing so many pieces, not just one big project. So on these off years of full reconstructs, we can go back and hit these small segments. Yes.
Do we have any updates on Charter undergrounding on Kalamazoo and East Lake? I haven't been there lately.
They are working on it. They're sporadic, but they're coming and going. They do have a contractor that's been on site. So they're in contact with us. I know AT&T has been there as of late, and they're pulling wire. I'm seeing stubs of wire out of the conduits, which is a good sign. One of the things they have to do is build a complete system live underground before they can kill the overhead without taking a customer disruption. So we go in first. We're the city. We built the street. We're the electric. We jump in, get all our equipment areas established, and then Charter and AT&T will follow. And pre-COVID, I would say it was usually about a year and a half. They do have the same issues we have. They have overhead areas that they won't drop until we do maybe another street over, because they have a fiber link or some major run that's feeding the system that they won't put the money into until we put the pipe in. So it's a balance act with them. But yes, Kalamazoo is on the docket and East Lake. That is a major link for them to get in. Okay, so I went through all those streets. We have some electric equipment area, landscaping. We have several, the normal underground we put in, we have these equipment landscape areas around, and they tend to kind of go by the wayside, and there's some of them are 25 years old. So we're going to go through and try to improve some of those. The 75,000 is for the Pennsylvania Park project, lighting upgrades. That's tied to Kendall's sidewalk project. The electric system GIS mapping, we're continuing our technology with GIS. We're building the database to someday implement GIS. We're collecting data, we're getting as-built into the system, we're getting maps into the workers' hands. But it's building the database for the future. So every year we put a little in there. The Emmett Street, East Mitchell to Michigan, that's just the underground electric if we do something in that segment. Jennings Avenue residential conversion, that's big on the docket for next year. Full length Jennings will be put underground from Kalamazoo to Howard, which has been an ongoing project, piecemealing, if you will, as we've touched it from all sides. Here's what Waukegan near Jennings residential conversion. There's about a block in there that's still overhead. Everybody else around it's underground. So they'll pick that up. Go ahead.
Does that include Carlton and Myrtle streets? Or that'd be the south end of.
Yeah, that, I don't think that does. They're just picking up the segment on Waukegan.
Okay.
Yeah, near Jennings.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see, I've been kind of raising the alarm about Carlton and Myrtle, because I know they've had some wires get down with trucks hitting them.
Yep.
I didn't see that in.
It may be because they're doing the first block of, they're doing by the Spittler building near Carlton. So I would say they're probably going to tie this into Waukegan. I don't think they'll leave that one block overhead.
That would be great.
But I'll check on that. Fulton between Emmett and Howard. This is just a small segment. Everything going down the hill on Fulton is already underground, but Petoskey Street and Fulton, they'll pick that up this year. Howard Street near Carlton. So I'm guessing that they may turn the corner. Grove Street near Howard. So we have portions of Howard from Grove all the way into the Central Business District is underground. They're going to pick this up and head towards Emmett Street, which is underground, which was done in 2017. We'll be putting in infrastructure to remove all the poles and wires.
But we do have to wait for
Charter and
those
8.
blocks, right?
They'll go in the same trench with us when we install. So it's just a timing.
You pulled all the pipes, but yeah.
They're still working in that segment. Correct. Yep. Okay, and this is they're over at Morgan, Preby, Hillcrest, residential conversion. We just did Porter Street. Wires are all still in the air. Bridge Street was done this year. They're going to start working on Morgan and Preby and Hillcrest. It's going to be a 2-phase approach. 2024 for phase 1, which I'll call west, that area. 2025, you'll see it again. It's going to be phase 2. This is a project in 2025 for electric. It is the metering station structure that serves the city of Petoskey. So there's 2 of these locations. One is out East Mitchell and one is on River Road, but this entire structure needs to be replaced. It's kind of a scary structure. It's been there for many, many years. And with the driving the way it is today, I've said either replace it and let's get a guardrail around it, because that is critical infrastructure for the city to serve. Petoskey substation, 46,000 volt line that serves the city out of that sub in circuits 6 and 8. This is tied to the Public Works project. Once we unveil that, which will be soon, hopefully, and there's a lot of components and lots of phase into this project, but one of the things to do to get whatever we do at the Public Works facility is we're going to bury the underground. And that's the 46 kV line that serves the city, at least a portion of it. There's maybe 600-700 feet away from the DPW will be buried. But all the distribution that you see under that 46 line will all be buried in conjunction with things on Sheridan. Water and sewer. I'm going to go through this pretty quick because I think I touched on a lot of this. We always put money in for spot repairs for our mill and fill projects and resurfacing. We will do investigations. We're doing some of them now, and we'll make repairs if necessary before the new top goes on. Bayview Avenue, there's your water main replacement. Bayview Avenue, sanitary spot repairs. Water and sewer, Emmett Street, there's the 150,000 for that block if we were to do the water and the sewer. Lead and copper rules, raw materials inventory, that's ongoing. We did some of that this year, but we're investigating a number of services to identify what type of material they are, so we can turn that into the state by the end of next year to meet our obligations for the lead and copper rule. Yes,
Mike, looking ahead, when I looked at the long-term capital projects like funding,
yep,
one of them was this lead and copper line replacement.
correct.
And I was curious because it's talking about that they have to be removed and replaced within the dwelling it serves. So I was wondering, like, why is that our cost?
That is the state mandates that. So we're doing that now.
Great question.
Great question.
So wait, even if, so if
But-
our line is copper, but it connects to a portion of iron, let's say, for
Yep.
example, or whatever, which could have potentially been connected to lead,
Correct,
the city has to pay for that portion that's.
correct.
To the copper.
And we're doing that now. On our full reconstruct projects, we are obligated, if we put a new main in, we have to do service investigations on every home. And if they're galvanized going into a home, we have to pull that galvanized out and put in new copper at the city's expense. And we've done that since Kalamazoo in 2020. And we did it last year at East Lake.
So we get reimbursed from the state for that.
We have all kinds of feelers out for grant funding and we're just not there with the state. There's a lot of disabled communities around the state that are gobbling that money up, but we're way down the list. But we inquire all the time about it. It's just the reality of what we're mandated to do. And once we do this inventory, which will be completed after next year, then we will submit that to the state and then we're obligated to do 5% a year over the next 20 years. So it's going to be a long-term project. And the state has told us behind the scenes that they will try to fund some of these replacements, but it will be very expensive. And it is when we do them now.
So even if that line is on the property of the residents. we're gonna
Correct.
Pay for it.
Correct.
What is the typical cost of that reconnection?
$7,000 on average to replace a service. We have ways of doing them cheaper, but that's what we budget. Because you're getting into landscapings, you're getting into basements. We have to hire a plumber to reconfigure. We're obligated to do it.
How many have we replaced so far?
We did 8 on Kalamazoo and I want to say 11, 12, 13 on East Lake.
Does that look like it's the same for all of the other streets? Is
Bridge Street ran with the same number. I'm going to say we did 7 on Bridge Street. One thing is that I want to make clear that if there is an emergency leak on a homeowner's side, we are not obligated to replace it. So it's only during reconstruct. If we reconstruct a water main and replace portions of the service, we're obligated for the whole service, but not during emergencies.
So we're looking at probably hundreds over the next.
And that's why it's in the long-standing funding and I do feel that hopefully the state will step up, but it's real sporadic right now. We're just not on their list, being Petoskey.
They're interested in distressed communities for.
Yep.
More than that.
Yeah. We have been told if we track everything we're doing, which we are, that we may, if we're in our name and number comes up, we may be able to be reimbursed. So we are tracking every dollar that we spend on these replacements.
Or you can be held up with Golden Star Best.
That's correct. I will tell you one thing that we have been replacing, when a homeowner has a service failure, we replace the city side, and we've been doing that since 2004. So we've had cases in the past where the homeowner spends this dollar to replace their service and they're up and running and then the street fails 2 weeks later. We're digging in the same spot where the curb stop is. So the water department implemented full replacement if a homeowner has an issue. They pick up their side and we pick up ours. So we're in good shape that way because of that.
Just a question. So
Mhm.
street connection and then the house connection and then the pipe between, does that get replaced as well?
Correct.
The whole thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Aeration tank blowers at the plant, real exciting stuff, but we have aeration tank blowers that control our foul air for our aeration tanks, and those are due for some upgrades and the PLCs that run those. Ingles pump station improvements, I'll show you a photograph, but that's more of a landscaping, roofing, some exterior improvements. These are the blowers at the plant, just to give you a visual, those are the blowers that blow the air into the aeration tanks. And we're doing some modifications to those. This is Ingles pump station. You see the landscaping's overgrown, the roof system needs some work, the door. We're gonna do some improvements, probably be tearing this out this fall, actually, and getting started on it. Motor pool. Yeah, that's yeah, I will tell you that the Christmas tree has wire within the tree that we're holding branches up with, if that helps anybody decide when they want to cut it down. Our line crew takes a lot of pride in putting those lights on, but they have wire that holds the limbs up because the lights just kind of make it sag. And they built the stars on top too, and they're pretty proud of that. Motor pool, we're getting into some towards the end here. We have 4 purchases, which is kind of unique. Usually we're into the 6, 7, 8 units. This is 4 because they're big ticket items. Public safety has a patrol vehicle due up next year. Public works, we're replacing a front end loader, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. And we have an underbody plow truck that's due, and 2013 front loader for parks. There's the loader. Nobody really wants to see it. It's kind of rusty. This is the one, we have 2 loaders at the DPW. The other loader does not go into the salt shed. This one does. We take our oldest loader, and that's the one we load the trucks with all winter. There's one of the underbodies, and there's one of Kendall's mowers. Pretty. Pardon? That is a Komatsu. The last one we bought was a Cat. We'll see. We'll price them out and see what we end up with.
Mike, I had a quick question. I noticed the patrol vehicle, and I obviously don't know much about the lifespan of those, but it's like 4 years.
Yep.
I thought I saw other ones later that were like 6 or 7 years later in the plan.
Yep.
Is there a general lifespan of those, or?
We try to take them to 100,000. That's when that's when they just start having transmission issues. But what happens, we used to do every 3 years. That was just automatic. We just turned them. And we've pushed those patrol vehicles out. So you'll see some that get high use. Some of the lieutenants, things will drive the Tahoes based on their gear. And then we have the patrol vehicles that they run more in the summer months. But it's pretty much based on mileage.
Okay.
And the one that's due up is, I think, is 4 years old, if I recall. We have some in the fleet yet that are pushing 5 or 6. So. All right, future projects. This is the DPW 2025 cold storage facility, and we'll be talking about this in the near future. But this is the big DPW and Parks and Rec facility upgrades. This is Parks and Rec on Curtis Avenue near Porter. And it's scheduled to have some improvements and building fixes, a cold storage facility in the rear of the building, and then a connector road that would tie it to the DPW, which is here. And right. So what we had a facilities, actually it's called a space programming study done probably 5 years ago, and we went and measured every piece of equipment, every picnic table, everything that's sitting outside. And basically what the architect did is he compiled a list of everything that we have today, put a safety factor in it for some future. But basically we want to get everything we have inside. So right now when you're seeing,
it's not cool.
It's cold storage. It's not a heated building. It's just shelving and sorry about that. I'm getting on a roll. Get the printout. No.
Not burning coal.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, but it is just it's a concrete floor. Thank you. Okay, where was I? I'm gonna jump over here to the salt sheds. You had a question?
I had a question. probably for later, but so there's gonna be a lot of discussion, and $16 million for this.
Correct.
DPW building. And just, you know, I'm sure as we get into it, just to get an idea of what the needs are.
Yep.
Is it spatial, is it square footage, is it design? Probably all of the above.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we have a facilities study that was performed on our existing facilities. And they looked at it from a perspective of, can we just upgrade what we have? And I think once you see that report, once it's concluded, once we get it, that's been 5-6 years ago, that you'll see that there's some real issues with our DPW and our Parks and Rec facility. Ventilation systems, heating systems, flooring. I mean, it's all usable today, but to say tear it out, put new in, or do we build new? And we'll be going over all of that. Here are the salt sheds that are due for replacement as part of the improvements. We phase this into a 3-year project, starts in 26 or 25, 26 and 27. We've been carrying that 3-year phase for probably 5 or 6 years now. It's been pre-COVID for sure. I don't know what the phasing will be or what the architects will come up with or how we fund this. That's what we're going to go to work on here before too long. But there's certain things that have to happen in a phased approach. It's just, do we do it yearly or we do it like 2 phases in 1 year, a year and a half? So we'll be going over all of that. The last thing that's being proposed in the 3-year phase now are the salt sheds get slid over to the DPW side up near the Midwest Siding building. And the Victory Gardens go on the other side of the street that are near the yard waste, recycling, and what else is over there? Yard waste and what is it? So no, the salt sheds are on it. Anyway, rubbish, yard waste pickup, yard waste disposal. So, yep, that's the sand shed is the black top, and we put the cold patch right next to that on the left.
So I had a question, maybe not decided yet, but
Yep.
So the garden could move over near the yard waste,
Correct.
but the yard waste does have some smell, the grass clippings.
Is that service, twice weekly?
Yeah, I'd say twice or 3. Yeah.
That's what the regulars.
The
yard
waste moving.
The yard waste is going to be in the same area, but it will be reorganized. And the thought is and not that right now I know it's off season with salt when we're using it, but right now we're commingling the salt sheds with the yard waste drop off. So we have, trucks that drive over to get cold patch. And we have people, the public, using the yard waste drop off. So our thought is and we're crossing Sheridan Street every time we go get a load of salt. So the thought was move the salt sheds over to the same side of the street as the DPW and put all the public use on the other side so we don't commingle those uses. But the way that it's being proposed is that the yard waste drop off, the Victory Gardens, and the what else is there? There's the recycling containers. We're looking at another place for public recycling for those green. Right. So it would be, but it's going to be reconfigured.
So there'll be sensitivity, I'm sure, that the community gardens have a nice set.
Yes. Yep.
Would that include redoing the river walk through that section?
There will, yes, it just the section near the salt sheds. Yeah. Yep, that's going to be looked at.
Sure, the way you guys do it all with the first class.
So there's different elements of that design. Yep. Yeah. Look at that. How do we? Yep.
What's the future of the existing Victory Garden land? Is that publicly owned land that's there?
It is publicly owned, and what the salt sheds being as they're proposed now kind of drop back into that bank, if you will, next to the Midwest Siding, if you're driving back to the substation. And then all of our material bins would be along that Victory Garden area. So topsoil, gravel, sand that we have scattered around different areas at DPW and at the Parks facility would all be at that location.
Going up the Sheridan Hill?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So all the materials, everything that we do at Public Works and Parks would be between the Curtis Building and the DPW.
That's come up twice at our board conventions and the city convention, that people want to be involved in the Hungry Hollow.
Yep.
Moving, because
Okay.
they're gonna have to do soil building, and there might even have to be some. Because of the salt sheds, and I don't know if there's like leachate or what that base looks like,
Yep.
but you're gonna have to rebuild the soil, dirt, raised beds or something. to replace.
Yep. Correct, everything that,
The salt sheds are-
yes, yeah, we will look at that closely because it's already been talked about. We're doing no cutting in that area, just based on the past. We do have that site at DPW that had the leaky tanks over the years that we had remediation. We did get closure to the site, but there are due care things that have to be done. Questions? Because that's all I have, unless there's, Tina?
Mine is just a more overarching question, like when I'm looking at page 2 here and the projections for capital spending in 2026, it goes up to 27 million plus. And I'm just kind of wondering what it is that's happening that year, that those projections are that significantly different. So I don't know to whom that should go.
From a project standpoint, that's the Public Works facility. That's
That is.
obviously very rough projection, but it's $16 million potential project.
Okay.
So likely that will be some sort of a bonded project that will look at all the options, obviously, to see what that looks like, but likely that will be a bonded project.
I just had a question in terms of like making a case for a millage. So when you lay out all the costs. And you think about a potential millage and trying to budget for that, I mean, I'm not talking about 2024, but like in 2025 or 2026, now that we have our millages are kind of freed up.
Mhm.
And we've talked or mentioned, like, could we do a Parks and Rec millage? Because clearly those Parks and Rec and public safety seem to be the ones that take the most from the general fund. So how could you leverage a millage, and can you make a case for that in your CIP process? So I guess I'm just kind of wondering where that conversation will come into play when we capital improvement projects for both those entities, Parks and Rec and public safety.
Yeah, you definitely could, because you know, the general fund is not sustaining itself, you know, we're relying on grants and just, you know, bits and pieces each year to get by. Or dipping into fund balance, you know, to make do, especially as, you know, all the inflation costs, all the employee fringe and everything. So it would be a great idea, either the public safety, or I think it would be a great idea, either the public safety, or great idea, Lindsay. Public
Great
safety,
idea.
there we go. For public safety or for parks.
Yeah. And I don't know how that would work in terms of like our budgetary conversations, or when you introduce the proposal of a millage in a budgetary cycle. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, that's likely, and that'll be a sequencing conversation, I guess. Or at first, is there a desire to do that? Certainly, I believe we could certainly make a strong case for parks or public safety. You know, there's a very high standard, a high bar, high expectation of what our residents want our public spaces to look like. And that's challenging in climates where we're so reliant on grants. So having a dedicated flow, and I would recommend an operating millage, not a capital millage personally, but certainly we would entertain any and all options at this point. But I think an operating would be something that we could utilize more effectively going forward, which would free up money for capital projects that we're not, you know, redirecting general fund dollars for capital, because we'd have some earmarked dedicated revenue. So it's about making our case. I think it's about casting that vision for this is what we would do with that millage revenue. These are what, and I think Kendall has a great plan right in front of them, needs assessment that we would love to attack next year, all of those items, but it's about prioritizing need. Looking at how far that dollar will go. So, and then it becomes, if there's a desire amongst city council to do this, when does it make the most sense? Obviously, we can't do anything this fall. Could we do an off election? Like a spring 24 request? Or are we into the presidential fall 24 sequencing, and then really can't. It's a very close eye on statewide parks millages, and I don't know what the percentage is, Kendall, but it's got to be like 90% successful across the state. These millage requests for parks, and likely public safety is the same way. I mean, those are well supported services that our residents enjoy and expect us to provide. So, what I would love to see is a grassroots effort. Kind of swell in the community, that we get people that are passionate about parks or public safety that want to take on this mantle and champion this, because if it's just the city shoving this millage forward, it's maybe a harder hill to climb. But if we can get a group of supporters in the community that really champion this and move it forward, I think that would be ideal. Right.
My follow-up question, and I understand the need for flexibility. It's the CIP, it's not the annual budget. You'll be developing the annual budget. But I am highly skeptical about the developers with regard particularly to the corner of Emmett and Mitchell. It's getting on almost 18 months again, at least for Mitchell Market, and they have an 18-month window from site review and approval by the Planning Commission. And the other one, the condominiums, has been back and has gotten an extension, but that's at least a year old now, right? So I'm highly skeptical as to whether those projects will be engaged this year. So the question is, do you have a priority list of other activities that you would take out of 2025 or somewhere else to engage in those in that area?
No, I think with what we have scheduled right now, I mean, I think it's 150,000 in water and sewer, 75 each, and 25 in streets. It's really, if it happens, okay. If not, we'll move on. I mean, we don't have any really reason to move that money out and say we're not going to do it.
And do you think that the timing at the corner of Mitchell and Howard is going to be, for the redevelopment of the Pennies building, is going to be adequate to allow you to move forward in 24 with the reconstruction of the sidewalk there?
My understanding is that they'll be reaching completion by the end of next year. And so we'll be in there at some point that I mean, the heavy lifting, when they start building the building up, is coming. But we won't start until all that work has been completed, and maybe we're just down to the inside. But we'll definitely do it.
And you have everything you need for the lofts, because that looks like they're going to start digging soon.
Yeah, we did in 2017, we did Emmett Street, and we stubbed all utilities into that property. So they will not be going out into the street to retrieve anything. So wonderful. We didn't know what was coming. We just took a guess and put some mains stubs in, and they're going to utilize those mains.
Well, and we'd like to hope that Maple Block will be done, but they probably won't start digging until
I would
later next year.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with their schedule at this point, so.
Okay.
I would just say, especially for planning commissioners, if you have any follow-up questions for me that I can help with before your meeting next week, certainly reach out to me, or you can go through Lisa and she'll get with me. I'm not planning on a 2.5 hour presentation for you again next week, so feel free, if there's anything we can clarify for your meeting, let me know, and we'll certainly be ready to clarify those things for you next week at your meeting.
Well, and I want to thank you for this meeting because I've been sitting on the planning commission for 2 years, and this is the first time I ever feel like I wasn't handed something in the last 10 minutes and told to recommend it. So,
And again, I certainly value your feedback and input. If there's ways that we can kind of massage this going forward, if you like this format for going forward, I appreciate that feedback. If there's things that we can tweak, we're certainly willing and available to do that as well.
I just want to add that I think it's very, very valuable to have both these groups together. Everybody hears everything all at once, understands the questions asked. I just think it's very valuable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Grab some pizza on your way out, grab a cookie.
No further business off of our